So, thank you guys, thank you Ogway, and thank you Shortless to join us on this call. So we are like BlockHub DAO. We are like a French crypto native community, and we are having a call with the team of Spice Finance, which is like a NFT slash DeFi crypto project. And first thing we can do is that can you guys introduce yourself and introduce your background and how did you create this idea of creating Spice Finance as a starter, and then we can go a bit deeper into what is Spice Finance, what is your metrics, and then about insight about the NFT finance space.
Sure, Os, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can give an intro on myself. Yeah, so I'm Shirtless. I'm one of the co-founders here over at Spice. I guess to kind of give a bit of background on myself, my background is like pretty non-traditional. So actually, I come from a background of chemical engineering, was going down like the academic route of hard science research and things of that nature. But then kind of along the way in the journey, I ended up working at some startups, particularly in the early stage like battery fields. So that's kind of where I got an introduction to like early stage operations and things of that nature. And then along the way as well, I kind of like developed an interest for crypto at large, just from like a philosophical kind of a background and interest. And that's how I kind of entered into the space, just like spending my free time aside from like my day job and my current career path, just playing around in crypto, reading books, also like just listening to podcasts, things of that nature. And then eventually, throughout that time, that was like mostly college as well as like post grad. And along the lines, Uguay here, myself, and then our third co-founder, Nia's kind of reconnected. We had known each other in the past, and then we decided to kind of start up Spice Finance. So at Spice, I was mostly working on like business development, user acquisition, marketing fronts, as well as later down the road, more of like the design, the UI, the UX out of the product. But yeah, that's my background.
Awesome. And I'm Uguay. Guess my background comes from TradFi. So I used to work in investment banking, specifically mergers and acquisitions, both in the fintech space, the financial space, as well as some like tech and media companies. I was actually one of the kind of my involvement in crypto started with Olympus DAO. If you guys may or may not remember, I was one of the first policy members there. I actually joined within the first week of the protocol launching. So I had a good time just kind of learning about DAOs, DeFi, and the space at large over at Olympus before leaving and eventually working with the rest of the team to start Spice Finance. At Spice Finance, I'm largely doing financial engineering, some dev work, business strat, as well as just like strategy development for the vaults themselves. And then I guess like in terms of what exactly Spice Finance is, as a quick intro, Spice Finance is largely, I think, best understood as like a Yearn finance, but for the NFT finance space. Specifically, we're a protocol that allow users to deposit ETH into one or more vaults, and then users can earn yield from automated NFT-backed lending strategies. And in the future, not limited to lending, but also just like a variety of different types of NFT finance strategies. So I think that's probably a pretty quick and dirty overview of like, the two of us and the protocol itself.
Okay, it's very interesting. Yes, thank you for the introduction. I have just like few questions just about the introduction of Spice Finance in order for our listeners to better understand. I would like to know like how do you guys manage to encounter each other? Like how did you have this idea of like creating a D app into this specific niche market, which is like NFT finance. You're talking about Iron, like maybe you have already some experience in the DeFi space, and you guys saw an opportunity for the NFT market. Can you elaborate a bit about how did you guys get together around this idea of creating this Iron of the NFT space?
Yeah, so we had all been pretty interested in DeFi and playing around with DeFi since basically DeFi summer as like a team. I think when we approached NFT Finance, like what we were really looking for were kind of unsolved problems in DeFi. And a lot of those extended to the NFT finance space. Like NFT finance, like a lot of the early problems, and even now today, the problems that still plague the space are centered around low liquidity, volatility, lack of oracles, etc. Which kind of led us to believe that the existing DeFi infrastructure that was built out for fungible tokens, ERC20s, is pretty poor at extending itself toward the NFT space. And there's going to be a requirement for NFT finance to have a completely different set of infrastructure, different set of protocols in order to kind of achieve those same effects. So that's kind of what drove us toward the NFT space and the NFT finance space. We also had I think, underlying belief about NFTs themselves, or more specifically about the fact that most financial assets in the real world, as well as like digitally emergent, are non-fungible in nature, or at least aren't completely fungible. And with that in mind, like, the early DeFi summer and just like DeFi infrastructure that was built out didn't really lend itself as scalable and effective to onboard the vast majority of value on chain the way it could if you had something that was a little bit more flexible towards non-fungibility. So that's kind of what drove us to even like operate in the NFT finance space. In terms of like Spice itself, really one of the bigger problems we notice is, even if you identified this problem of, okay, I want to bring liquidity into NFTs, it's not immediately clear how to do that. And there's actually a lot of work that needs to be done, and a lot of like financial modeling that users need to do in order to actually provide liquidity towards the NFT and the NFT finance space. And so we just wanted to simplify and automate that process by giving users access to vaults with those automated lending strategies and liquidity deployment strategies.
Okay, I understand. I have 3 questions because you mentioned that you can see yourself as the Iron of the NFT space. If I'm not mistaken, when it comes to Iron, like it's possible for everybody to create vault strategies for specific assets. And so on, the community by itself can choose a vault and can use the strategy. I know it works like it has a bit of hierarchy, so someone can, people that have big position in Iron teams, they confirm this new vault. How does it work when it comes to Spice Finance? Is it the same system, or for now, is it only the team that propose strategies? Or in the long term, you can see like community members creating their own strategies that they will propose to Spice Finance and maybe create a business model on that?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, we wanted to approach building Spice by building the infrastructure in order to spin up vaults first. And that's largely wrapped up. Like we have the ability to pretty quickly spin up any kind of vault strategy on an NFT collection, any number of the NFT finance protocols, and like the parameters around how you'd want to build out the strategy. What we don't have at the moment is a DAO-like structure or even a community-based like incentive program for users to propose strategies. We do have a community called Spice Team 6 that helps us kind of think through what kind of strategies might be more popular or not. And that's actually how, we arrived at building the Blur strategy itself, or the Blur Vault. But that's something that we're like seriously considering. I think like internally we all have like a pretty big belief around, the Web3 crypto ethos of accessibility, permissionlessness, and we've built out the infrastructure to spin up vaults. So At this point, it's execution, I think, to maybe take it the next step and build something that's a lot more permissionless than what it is right now.
Okay, so right now, if I'm not mistaken, you have two vaults, so two strategies, Prolog Vault and Blur Vault. Can you maybe go a bit deeper into what is the difference between those two vaults and what are the metrics? When did you launch them? What did you see in terms of growth? Is it right now flat? Can you see some dynamic of my English is quite bad. Can you see some dynamic of uprising for this strategy or? Yeah.
So I think the Prologue and Flagship Vault, those are like the two main vaults where we launched like our first mainstay strategy. So it's a strategy that lends against, I want to say like 15 different collections across NFTFi, Arcade, Bend, and a few other P2P and P2Pool protocols, as well as like Paraspace, for example. I think like the TVL on that at best was like somewhere in the combined TVL was somewhere around 400 ETH. And that's like purely organic. That's before we launched the Blur Vault, which came, I want to say like a month after Blur's lending product came out. The Blur Vault is currently only lends and puts out bids on the Blur lending platform. And those bids are largely optimized for farming Blur points with a little bit of like ETH APY. The reason being is that it's, for the most part, far more lucrative and attractive to farm points through lending than it is to like farm yield through lending or like real yield on Blur at the moment. And since that has launched, has organically picked up, I want to say like 450 ETH worth of TVL. And effectively, there was like no real marketing that we did around that, as it was something that we kind of whipped up pretty quick as we're kind of performing research and development in-house. So that has brought us to like a combined TVL of around 700 ETH. In terms of like returns, I think the Prologue and the Flagship Vault are like averaging somewhere, if I want to say like 15%, 15 to 30% like historical APY. So the Prologue Vault has like a 19% historical APY, and then Flagship is like 14%. The Blur Vault, depending on how you calculate the point value for a Blur point, we're probably looking at between like 70 to upwards of 300% APY historically. And I think there's like the ETH yield on the Blur Vault is effectively flat. And then in terms of TVL, like we've kind of grown from, we've like 2x our TVL, or close to 2x. We've gone from like 400 ETH TVL to 700 over the course of the last, let's call it like four or 5 months. So that's kind of a little bit, I think, around the growth metrics. I think some other interesting features to note around the vault performances themselves. When the Prologue Vault was at its peak, like we were a top 10 NFT lender by lending volume. And currently the Blur Vault is, in terms of like point farming efficiency, 99.9th percentile. So we're effectively almost always like the top 5 best point farmer on Blend, just the strategy itself. And like on the leaderboards, we consistently are locking in, top 25 position with probably the smallest ETH bag on Blur. So that's like pretty solid, I think, in terms of, we've been pretty happy with the performance of the Blur Vault itself, and I'm happy to like go into the details there. But I think that's like a round or a quick summary on the metrics themselves.
Okay, so to try to summarize, like Prologue Vault is like a strategy where like a specific whitelisted NFT collection can be lent, that you propose liquidity for on specific deal, like NFTFi, like Arcade, as you said, and you receive like a native yield which make the API for the strategy, and you take like a cut, like a business performance. And on the other side, like you also propose like Ether liquidity on the Blur lending platform. And by proposing available liquidity for specific NFT collection, you collect some points that will be in the future converted into like Blur token.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, okay. Okay, I have 3 questions about it because like you talk about NFT liquidity, you talk about all of this concept, and you are trying to bootstrap this liquidity by proposing like stakers to receive like a yield on it. One of my question is that like for now, like you said, combined you have like maybe 700 Ethers, so maybe like $1 million, $1.2 million of TVL. What will happen if like let's say like tomorrow, let's say like our podcast make like our call make like a big view, and you receive like 2 million more TVL. Is there a limit, when it comes to your strategy, your vault, to be able to make this liquidity to work? Do you in what terms, in what kind of number do you see this limit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we did build in like the last feature we pushed was effectively address this. It was like a scalability feature around collection leverage. So I think some quick numbers to throw out. Like at the moment, the TVL of like NFT finance loans themselves is around $80 million. So there's quite some room to scale into. You could probably, without directly affecting too much of without noticeably affecting the leverage within the system, you could probably scale our strategies to like 10 to 20 mil. But with that in mind, one thing that we built out was a measurement of how much leverage there is on numbers of collections, as well as like how exposed the vaults are. So that's to say, like when a collection gets noticeably more levered, aka more NFTs within that collection have leverage, as well as when one of the Spice vaults is like overexposed to that collection. Maybe there's like over 10% exposure in terms of TVL. Those factors directly influence the LTV calculations on the loans that the vaults put out, as well as affect the APY calculations. So that's to say, like, as a collection gets more levered, or as a vault gets more exposed to a specific collection, the vaults reduce LTV and increase APYs in order to counteract the risk that the vaults are taking on.
How do you calculate this risk? Because for example, it's been maybe 1 year and a half since we experienced like a downtrend in the NFT market. When it comes to NFTFi, if there is like a concurrent to SpiceFi, or even if there is like retail proposing liquidity, against NFT, there is a concurrence, and because of this concurrence, you're forced to propose like higher LTV or maybe like lower APY. Mm-hmm. How do you manage this risk of collecting some bad debt?
Yeah, so I guess like there's like a good amount of financial modeling that goes into the loan pricing. And I think this is also like probably a good place to pause and say, like, anytime you're engaging in Oracle-less lending, or even when you're deciding what an LTV should be with an Oracle, or you're dealing with low liquidity assets, you probably ought to be modeling the volatility as well as you can and like putting a fair amount of buffers. Specifically, what Spice Finance has done is we've built out like credit rating infrastructure or loan pricing infrastructure. So the way this works is collections have like historical drawdowns. There's correlations between the collections, and there's also volatility, as well as like the liquidity and spread on a specific collection that all go into an exotic options formula that attempts to determine what like a limit is for an LTV. Now, even though you have the limit, there's always a risk that like a loan ends up coming in as bad debt. And so the next piece is around finding the proper interest rate or the proper APY that the user should be charged in order to counteract that risk. And then on top of that, you add, that you might get some kind of APY that's going to give you the break even of like, you should charge 30% at 60% LTV for a 1 week loan. That gets you to like a break even for the risk that the system's calculating. And then you stick in another 15% APY as almost a premium. So what that means, I think, like in a more combined or like a more comprehensive system, is that the vaults look to expose themselves towards collections that are underbid, where you can get solid premium against the risk that you're taking. And they look to, and they effectively systematically underexpose themselves on collections that are, where the premiums are competitive in the market and the LTVs are high. That way, we're attempting to give the users, or the vaults attempt to maximize risk or reward for the level of risk that they're taking on.
Okay, yeah. So basically it means that when it comes to the Prolog Vault or the Blur Vault, you guys propose liquidity to NFTs that are not really, well, there is not a lot of concurrence. So maybe the NFT collections that are not really famous, not really popular. So in a way, like it's better for you because you have like some kind of, like the majority of the liquidity for this collection. But on the other end, this collection are maybe more illiquid, so you're taking more risk, but because of this, you're getting paid higher. My question now is that did it happen? Like the NFT market, have been in a downside since 1 year. SpiceFi have been created maybe 1 year ago. I'm not exactly sure about the exact date, but I believe you guys created your DApp when the market was already in a downtrend, the NFT market.
Yeah.
Did it happen to you, like that you collected some bad debt?
Yeah. I think it's inevitable that you, if you're dealing with low liquidity assets and you don't have oracles, it's inevitable that at some point you'll take on bad debt. And if you look at the numbers, if you don't want to take on bad debt, you're better off getting like staking yield on like ST, or Lido, or Frax, or whatnot. You basically don't get rewarded for that level of risk. So there were drawdowns in the protocols, but like I think it's probably a testament towards our strategy that like the Prolog Vault, for example, which has been around since February of 23, is averaging around a 19% APY through an NFT downturn. And like a wide variety of NFT downturns, right? We're talking about like the CryptoPunk slide down, the move in Azukis, and just like all the other collections that have been getting hammered, like, for example, Doodles just getting absolutely destroyed. And the protocol has done, I think, pretty effective job at still juicing out yield despite the markets being down only. So that kind of like gives us pretty good hope that, in a bull market where NFTs are not down only, and there is also demand for leverage, the vaults can outperform rather significantly. But it's something that I think, is like, we just have to wait for that to happen. In terms of like the philosophy behind designing the vaults, like we attempt to make everything as algorithmic and scalable as possible, such that there isn't any kind of manual input involved. Because we think that once you begin to introduce manual input, you begin to move away, I think, from like the crypto ethos. And then you also are prone towards, bad strategy, right? We want like everything to be long-term, decentralized, permissionless, and automated.
Okay, yeah. Maybe if I can add something is that you have the risk of bad debt, but you have also the risk of recovering like the NFT at a discount and selling it for like a quick profit. You guys work with like, you are based on top of peer-to-peer NFT lending protocol such as NFTFi. Did it happen a lot of times that you lent some liquidity to like an NFT and didn't receive back the liquidity necessary to close the contract, and so on receive the NFT and resell it on the market for like a profit?
Yeah. So what's interesting is with P2P lending, the vast majority of defaults, aka when someone forgets to pay back their NFT, are profitable for the protocol. So it ends up like a lot of users who borrow against their NFTs, like either forget to pay back their loans, and the way like NFT Finance or X2Y2 or Arcade are structured is that if a user forgets to pay back the liquidity, then we get the loan, we can reclaim the NFT and then sell it on the open market. Most of those end up being profitable. Like I said before, there were some bad debt situations where the returns weren't profitable, but over the long run, the positive yield and positive returns outweigh the like negative returns that have occurred, even during like hardcore market crashes.
Okay. Do you guys have any Dune Analytics dashboard, or we can see like for the different blurs, for the different vaults, what is the repartition between the liquidities that you lend for specific collection? Is that transparent, or do you control it like every day? Like you can change the parameters if you want to be more exposed maybe to CryptoPunk, or the next day you want to be more exposed to another collection. How does it work to make this change? Is it decentralized? Is it the team like SpiceFi team that have the monopoly of decision when it comes to this decision?
Yeah, so we don't have a Dune Analytics page, but we do have like vault outlines and details on the front end, SpiceFi.xyz. If you go into, for example, the Prologue vault, you can see the marketplace breakdown, collection place breakdown, the loans, etc. The protocol's not fully decentralized. There are aspects that are I guess maybe the term would be decentralized, but like, for example, the smart contract vault system, that's been completely audited. It's completely open source. So you can, for example, like funds can only ever get routed towards the marketplaces that are integrated with the smart contract. So funds can only ever get routed towards NFTFi, Paraspace, like BendDAO, MetaStreet, for example. In terms of the loan parameters themselves on the P2P platforms, those are decided, or those happen on a centralized system. It's completely autonomous. And there is a pathway forwards towards making that decentralized, but it requires like a fair amount of ZK tech. And it's like the same level of risk that one incurs for, let's say, a year in finance strategy, where the like strategist itself is centralized as well. But there is like the tech is being built out to decentralize those kind of things with vault strategies.
Okay. Do you see like any new strategies coming in the future, or is there like new opportunities that you guys are waiting? Like we talk a lot now about with Spice Finance, we talk a lot about giving liquidity for like NFT itself, but there is a lot of people in the NFT finance that believe most of the liquidity will come from projects that will permit this NFT to be fractionalized. Is that something that you are following? Is that a trend that you can see coming in the future months?
Yeah. So I think like, and also Shirtless, feel free to jump in at any point here if you want to. But I think like the way we view NFT finance is, number one, like NFTs are probably the wrong terminology. Even like PFPs are largely semi-fungible. Like within a collection, the various NFTs, especially like floor NFTs, are kind of effectively fungible between each other. And then maybe as you have something rare, it's a little bit more non-fungible. And then the ERC standards for what an NFT or like semi-fungible or less fungible token, those ERC standards are always changing. So it's not always 721 or like even 1155, but you have things like 4626, which is, you know, popularly used on like the RWA space, or you have like Friendtech keys, which, you know, you'll have like 40 holders, right? Those themselves are fungible, but there's like a couple, you know, there could be a couple thousand keys on the market for various influencers, right? So I think like where NFT finance is going and where DeFi itself is also going is towards Oracle-less, long tail, like low liquidity financial infrastructure that happens to include PFPs and the NFT space, but I think is not only it's not limited to like RWAs, Web3 gaming assets, any kind of digitally emergent assets that kind of begin to get developed. And I think like our perspective, and I think a lot of people's perspective in the NFT finance space is that like the infrastructure that needs to be built out should encompass those use cases.
Okay, so you might see in the future more protocols like coming for this idea of fractionalize this NFT and so on by transforming this NFT into ERC20 token, they can be more easily integrated within the DeFi space. Because when it comes to the NFT itself, you need to create a whole new infrastructure like you guys are creating with NFTFi, and then there is SpiceFi on top, and then there is like Blur lending. So I can understand, I can see there is multiple opportunities to bring liquidity to NFT. I think that's very interesting. I don't know if any of our members have any question about the NFT finance space, or even if you have any specific question for the Spice Finance team. Maybe we can ask Shortless because he hasn't talked a lot for now. Shortless, which is you are like the business developer of Spice Finance, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the roles that I kind of cover on the team.
Okay, yeah. So it will be interesting to have like your point of view of the NFT market, and how do you see like the market recovering after the on the coming months. It's been a long time, since the NFT market is in a downtrend. NFTFi was like a kind of a big narrative. It hasn't really yet take off. What do you see that can really bring people again to NFT? Is there like a specific subsector that you are paying attention? Yeah, I would be curious to have your opinion on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth mentioning that a lot of the theses that we've developed internally, we kind of talked through. So we, at least Ugo and I, kind of share a lot of similar, positions with regards to NFT and NFT finance. I think that something's worth mentioning for NFT finance in particular is that, like, I think that NFT finance is somewhat of a reactionary industry versus like NFTs in general. What I mean by that is that like NFT finance does not give NFTs product market fit, but rather NFTs have to find product market fit, and then NFT finance kind of fits into that picture, right? So that's all to say that I don't think any of like the NFT finance protocols will like essentially force NFT adoption. Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting framework to kind of think through with regards to like looking at these different protocols, right? I think the other thing that I'll mention is that like on the NFT side, I think that's something that is probably gonna bring in eyeballs into like the semi-fungible, non-fungible space is gonna be something that like disrupts the current model rather than a recovery of the current model. That's not to say that I don't think that NFTs or like PFPs and stuff like that will die and go away, because I think that PFPs and just artworks in general, like they will always have a place in like the digital space as like visual representations of either community, people, online personas, whatever. So I think that that industry will always exist, but it's not going to be like the main use case of NFTs. Like Ugo was saying, there's a lot of other areas that we think will gain adoption. For example, like RWAs coming on chain, GameFi could blow up. Mm-hmm. But I think that when you think about RWAs and GameFi, you have to be very careful Because if you listen to any like NFT finance podcast or talk, they will always talk about RWAs and this is why we're building here, but they never like mention how they will position towards those things coming on chain, and then also like how those things will come on chain, right? Because it's like very easy to say that everything will get onboarded on chain, but what's the incentive for RWAs to come on chain? So there's a lot of like questions you have to think around that, and then also something that we had a pretty fun time kind of developing internally also that Uwe touched upon was like the different non-fungible standards, right? So does it make sense, for example, for all RWAs to get onboarded as ERC 721s? You kind of touched upon like fractionalization, right? Like, should there just be a standard that like has fractionalization built in rather than protocols that fractionalize assets, right? Because one of the driving factors for like RWAs coming on chain, for example, is just accessing global liquidity, right? And if you want to access more liquidity, you fractionalize by default, right? Rather than fractionalizing subsequently. So there's a lot of like kind of these like swirling questions with regards to, there's like verticals that you could look at in NFTs. You could also look at the standards themselves, whether or not they make sense. And then from there, I think you kind of look at NFT finance as like a layer on top of the NFTs and use cases. Like I mentioned, like I don't think that anything in NFT finance is going to force a use case for adoption of NFTs. It kind of comes like subsequently to NFTs finding their product market fit amongst like the wider audience.
Okay.
So yeah, just some thoughts.
I have another question because like NFTFi narrative was a very strong narrative that was pushed by a lot of VC. Is today like the current environment when it comes to competitors have changed? Do you see like a lot of projects building the NFTFi on the NFTFi narrative, on the NFTFi sub-industry died? Or do you see like a lot of new projects, a lot of new ideas being financed and being created? Do you believe like it's more easy now that it's a bear market, or you can see like still a lot of people trying to take market share on this kind of bringing liquidity to the NFT token?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's like two sides of the coin. So it's difficult to say exactly like to have a very, it's easier in some respects and then also harder in some respects, right? I think the first thing to mention is that NFT finance is still a very young industry. So, like incumbents, I don't think there's any real such thing as incumbents. You can kind of look at NFTFi, Blur, BendDAO, for example, but those companies are still young and they definitely have like, there's definitely opportunities to like vampire tag them, for example, right? In the same way that like Blend has kind of done, or Blur did with OpenSea, right? So there's no real incumbents in the space, in my opinion. So in that respect, it's like, it's still open for anyone to take it. It's just a matter of, execution and then also like bringing a 10x product. With regards to like funding, I think there's still like a good amount of funding that's coming into NFT finance. So if you have a good idea and you have like a good understanding of the users as well as like what they want and how to execute a go-to-market strategy well, then you could, get funding, get off the ground, and build towards the bull. But I think that, to your point, there are a lot of protocols that seem to be dying out. The main reason from like our analysis, to be honest, is mostly due to like poor execution for go-to-market, right? A lot of these protocols, I'll speak to like NFT lending because we have a lot of experience there. A lot of like NFT lending protocols that have like died out or sunsetted actually have like robust designs for their marketplaces in terms of like capital efficiency, giving the borrowers what they want, things of that nature. But for example, a lot of them, when they try to kind of build out these mechanisms, just become overly complicated, for example. And then as a result, when they launch, nobody wants to use the protocol. And there seems to be like recurring instances of that. So there's like, that's all to say that there's an opportunity still available. I think there's still funding going into the space. They're incumbents, but likely they're more paper incumbents than they are like, something that you should be really afraid of if you have determination. But you just got to be very careful because you are operating in the bear, right? So like whatever strategies that you deploy, whatever product you have to bring, it has to be like like a true 10x versus like
Mhm.
a bull market when there's like liquidity flooding into the space and it's very easy to get volume onto your protocol.
Yeah, it's very interesting because you mentioned about the word, vampirizing when it comes to Blur, like announcing like a liquidity mining with a future airdrop for users and
Mhm.
for people that provide liquidity. Is that like private, or can we have like already a glimpse into the growth strategies that you will employ for the bull market? Are you also planning to create some kind of an airdrop and to bootstrap your growth this way? Um, have you already discussed about a specific growth strategy for when the liquidity will be back into the NFT market?
Yeah. So these are things that we're all thinking about behind the scenes. There's no solid plan that I can give you right now. So there's no like step-by-step play that, I can kind of reveal to you at the moment. Most of our time since the launch of the Blur Vault has been focused on building out that infrastructure, like Uguay was saying, to kind of allow people to spin up strategies into the vault. So that's like we're focusing on the product before we kind of look at growth, trying to avoid situations like I just mentioned with other NFT finance protocols. But that being said, like I think that pretty much like everything is on the table for us, right? There's I won't say that we won't launch a token or anything like that, but I will say that like the design and the announcement of something like that will be, definitely something that is carefully planned out. We want to make sure that it's not, we're not launching a token for the sake of launching a token, but it makes sense from like a strategic standpoint as well as like, giving users actual value. So we're taking our time with that. And then with regards to like other growth strategies, there's like a lot of like other cool techniques that we can deploy, involving like, for example, like partnering with NFT teams, right? So like you can imagine, for example, like if we develop relationships with like the Milady community, they could spin up like a Milady vault that only lends against like Milady assets, right? Remelias, whatever. And, in doing so, they could kind of start generating revenue from their team, and then also like support the floor price of their collection as well, just helping provide liquidity for their holders. So that could be something like sponsored vaults, from both influencers and NFT collections and things of that nature as well. So everything's on the table. We haven't finalized anything, but we're definitely thinking about it ahead of the potential bull run.
Okay. One of questions that I have about the business side of Spice Finance is that Uguay mentioned that currently the current TVL for like NFT lending is like 80 million. Spice Finance has 1.2 million, 1.5 million. And I feel like Spice Finance is in direct concurrence with like LSDfi when it comes to Ethereum 2.0, and the protocols that build on top the proof of stake protocol, consensus. How can you explain that Spice Finance has only 1 million TVL when it comes to while there is 80 million liquidity in the NFT lending space, and when the NFT lending space has like yield that is 4 times more like bigger compared to the native yield of most of other LSDfi products?
Yeah, I think there's probably like two strong reasons. The first is educational in nature. Like the vast majority of volume done or TVL within NFT finance is on P2P platforms with users who have like sophisticated systems. So ones that are effectively like competitive with Spice Finance. In terms of like onboarding additional liquidity, there is a like educational hurdle that has to come into play when you're bringing retail into like deposit into a vault, for example, versus go choose to deposit in like a more traditional DeFi vault. And the reason being is that NFT finance is fundamentally riskier and has different types of risk and liquidity parameters than regular DeFi. So that's to say, like, there's an educational hurdle when it comes to the sophistication of what NFT finance really is, and also quelling concerns about risk. The second piece is in terms of, I think, like execution on our end, we have not really put much focus into driving TVL for our protocol at the moment. I think we're like largely focused around research and development and like making sure our product works effectively before we're onboarding significant TVL. And there are like strategies that I think we could employ to drive TVL, one of which could involve debt financing, reaching out to various protocols or DAOs that have liquidity that might be deploying it to NFT finance itself. For example, like right now, if you're like a Blur lender, unless you're like one of 4 other Blur lenders, you effectively have there is no reason you shouldn't just deploy capital into the Spice Blend Vault, the Spice Blur Vault. The reason being is that we effectively provably outperform users on Blend with our strategy. I think it's just a function of us going out there and getting the word out to users about what we have built and what kind of offerings we're providing, as well as like just de-risking through educational means. And that's something that we have not optimized for up until now.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I understand. Okay. I don't know if the community has any more questions to ask to Spice Finance. There is one of our members that came a bit late on the call and he didn't really was here when you talk about the risks that are linked to both of your strategies, and how is that possible that you managed to have such a big performance considering the NFT market was down? Can you just maybe come back on this point to close the call, just about how is that possible that Spice Finance managed to have such a great performance while the NFT market was clearly dying?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 big pieces here. The first is, I didn't mention this before, but around appraisal. So we aggregate appraisal protocols in the space, and we have, we are always optimizing for the lowest error rate and the lowest median aggregate percent error in terms of appraisal. So we have the best appraisal system on the market, and that's just a function of aggregation. And then like whatever additional development needed to be done internally for NFTs.
Can you define what is appraisal? Because I'm not sure to follow you.
So like it's a combination of identifying what a specific NFT's current price is, as well as what an NFT collection's like liquidity floor is. So whenever we lend against an NFT, it's like an NFT could be, let's say you're looking at a Bored Ape, like you don't necessarily know what the value of that NFT is. Like if you needed to sell it, you needed to sell it immediately, it's not immediately clear how much value you're going to get for that, right? Like what kind of price you're going to get for that. So we have a pretty comprehensive appraisal system that optimizes for reducing error in terms of calculating what an NFT is worth when it's lent against, or what an NFT collection, like what the top bid on the NFT collection realistically is, given that you have like spoofing. So that's the appraisal piece. The second piece, and I think this is more important, is like the strategy itself. There's a fair amount of financial modeling involved in terms of calculating like what is a max LTV, what is an optimal LTV.
Mm-hmm.
The factors that go into that, or the variables, include historical drawdown, correlations with other protocols or other collections, volume, and then volatility over the last day, hour, 3 days, 7 days, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So those are all inputs that help us arrive at a optimal LTV, or like what kind of risk rating you might be giving an NFT. And then on top of that, we're able to, from that, we have like an exotic options model that basically autonomously spits out what is a break even APY. And then you can just add a premium on top of that APY to juice out additional yield. So what the protocol, comprehensively does is effectively optimizes for risk-adjusted returns. So there's always a level of risk you're taking on lending against low liquidity assets. The system autonomously attempts to lend against low-risk NFT collections and low-risk NFTs that are giving us high yield. And that's how we've managed to, drive 19% yield on the Prologue Vault, despite being, the NFT markets being down 90%.
Okay. It's very clear for me. Can I just one last question before we end this? I don't want you guys to be too much late. We've seen recently new protocols on the NFT finance coming to life. Like I'm thinking about NFT perps. Is that possible that in the future you guys will maybe hedge some risk using a perpetual contract on NFT or maybe option contract on NFT? Is that something that you are
100%. Yeah, that's definitely. I mean, we've done business development and been in contact with protocols that provide those kind of features. So that's 100% something that we, as we scale strategies, that we'd have implemented.
Okay. So it was very interesting, guys. Thank you for the call. I don't know if our community has maybe some question. It's already a bit late, but you guys can write them down and we can give you. I don't know if you want to add something to finish this call, but for me it was very interesting, and I'm very glad that you guys came to discuss about your product on BlockHub DAO.
No, yeah, I mean, it was a pleasure being here, and thank you for organizing this. If you want to join our community, we actually have to update our Discord link. So I'll just get back to you or whatever with the Discord link if you guys want to join there. And then also our Twitter is Spice_Finance if you want to find information with regards to what new stuff is going on, or performance updates, things of that nature. So that's pretty much it.
Okay. So it's perfect, and thank you for your time, guys. And we'll keep in touch, and we will write a small thread, because we are directly exposed to Prologue Vault, and we want to give you guys some visibility, because it's a very interesting product, and I can say you guys have put a lot of thought and a lot of mathematics behind your appraisal model. So you guys deserve more recognition.
Thank you.
All right, bud.
Yeah, thank you guys. I will stop the call now. Up.